All right, everybody, good morning again. Welcome back to our all-member meeting here in Berlin. So my name is Walt Miner. I'm the AGL community manager and general gopher. And so I'm here to give you a roadmap update and kind of what we've been doing the last year or so and what we plan to do in the next year or two. But first, it's been 3 years since we had an all-member meeting in person, and a long time ago, in a place far, far away, we were supposed to go to Hawaii. And you can get your official Hawaii AMM sticker at the front desk, because I've had them in a box for the last 3 years, waiting for some people to take them, and I don't want to take them back home. These are, you can, if you grab a bunch of them, you could sell them on eBay. Meanwhile, in the last 3 years, I was going to give you more pictures. I, got sick of the weather in Chicago. I was shoveling a lot of snow. I moved to warmer places. I moved to Asheville, North Carolina, in the mountains. So I moved from the flatlands of the U.S. to the mountains. And then we started traveling again. And in Japan, in December, I became an apprentice sushi master. So if you need some sushi made, just call me. I can do it. And Jan Simon also became an apprentice sushi master when we were in Tokyo in December. It's all fish. No, it's not all fish. You wish. That is an omelet. Oh, yeah. Okay? It's not all fish. So, let me just start out by saying AGL, I think over the last 8 years, we've created this AGL Unified Code Base. And what I'm trying to show here is kind of the world of possibilities. You can build a lot of different things using AGL. And Mizuyama-san kind of alluded to that. And we've kind of talked about this. But basically, we showed AGL, proper, we'll say, or the AGL staff and contractors, we showed 3 demos running 3 different things at CES, 2 different green machines, one running a Flutter IVI on our AGL reference hardware, with a Qt ICE, instrument cluster running on a Raspberry Pi 4, with a steering wheel connected via CAN. I think I have pictures of all these somewhere. A second green machine running a Flutter IVI and a Flutter instrument cluster on top of KVM, so they're running in hypervisors. Again, our CAN steering wheel talking to that. We had an instrument cluster demo that was put together by our instrument cluster expert group, Yamaguchi-san, Kurakawa-san, Ishii-san, and they ran a containerized instrument cluster demo with a Qt instrument cluster that they developed. So now you're talking 3 different demos that we showed with 3 different instrument cluster graphics environments, three different GUIs basically that we were showing. And then that cluster demo had a keypad with multiple containers, and with the keypad you could tear down one container, say running the Flutter version of IVI, and bring up a new container running the Qt version of IVI, and then hit another button and show the web apps version of IVI. That's actually a pretty cool demo. We're going to show that one next week at Embedded World, as well as one of our green machine demos. Then Panasonic, like Mizuyama-san discussed earlier, had a great CES demo, running yet a different version of things on top of AGL on the reference hardware. And then they were actually able to show Qualcomm, the Qualcomm hardware, as well as the Renesas RCAR 3 hardware. And yet another version, EPAM, had a wonderful demo where they were showing some of the concepts that were being developed with ELISA, the Embedded Linux and Safety Applications project. And they were running basically AGL on top of a Zen hypervisor with Android in another virtual machine. So, from our beginnings of running just a single IVI version at a trade show back in the day, when I had these huge boards I had to ship full of different things, We can now show many, many different things with different companies, and this is only just touches base. We also had other companies, like Dan said. We had a number of different kiosks at CES with other companies. We had Igalia showing their web apps, their latest web apps version of the IVI system. We've got people running a telematics version with a headless version of AGL. So there's all sorts of wonderful things you can do with AGL at this point in time. And we're going to continue to evolve that. Over the last few years, and especially into last year, I did a longer version of this presentation, I think, this particular transformation during ALS. But basically, what you've seen over the last few years is we've transitioned from AGL writing a lot of code that we then had to maintain. It wasn't very, there wasn't a lot of, we were the upstream. We had to maintain it. So things like the AGL app framework and the AGL advanced audio agent, or 4A as we called it, things like that we were stuck maintaining. Over the last 8 years, we've continued to look around and evolve what's out there in open source. And now in our latest releases, in Needlefish and in Octopus, we've now moved off into a System D environment for managing applications. We've now got Pipewire, and we work extensively with the Pipewire community for audio, and as well as Pipewire and WirePlumber for policy management. We've replaced our in-house, homegrown vehicle signal manager, again, that we were maintaining, and it was difficult to maintain. Now we're using an upstream version of the vehicle VSS. I'm going to blank out on what VSS is again, but Vehicle Signal Service from Covisa, and now we're running that for our connectivity. We've now got our own AGL compositor, and like I said, we've got multiple IVI images and multiple instrument cluster images you can build, as well as a telematics version that people are working with. So we have this lengthy and very discussion-oriented feature planning process that we go through every year. And just to review, at the end of that, we end up with a, let's call it a top 10 list of features we want to implement every year. So just to review what we had in 2022 and where we ended up, this was the kind of the top 10, I think it's actually 9 on this feature list when I get through the 2 slides, features that we were going to work on last year and how we ended up. So like Ms. Yamasan said, we made a big investment, both Panasonic and other companies, in Vert.io. We completed a lot of work there. We showed that at CES. So basically, this was our top priority. We completed a lot of work. Toyota was going to contribute a new version of their base system for product readiness. Well, that didn't happen. Toyota's decided not to basically work on that. So again, not something that AGL specifically was going to work on. It was a contribution. They decided not to contribute it, so no harm, no foul. Reference hardware, again, we're looking at adding the Qualcomm SoC, as Dan told you. We were hoping to get that done last year. Due to some issues with Qualcomm and open source BSPs. That didn't happen. We're hoping it happens this year. Our containerized AGL demo. Well, I just talked about that. We showed that at CES, the cool demo with the keypad and the different containers running different IVI systems and the instrument cluster. I called that partially complete, and the reason is it worked. We could show it at CES. We did not get everything upstreamed into our code base. So you cannot today go off and run that yet, but we're hoping very soon. Most of the pieces are in place in Garrett now in an Octopus, but you can't completely duplicate that demo on your own at this point. But we're hoping to get that done very soon. Flutter, Toyota did a lot of work on basically getting Flutter into our ecosystem last year, then providing updates so we can run multiple versions, we can support multiple Flutter apps. We had reference basically now for Octopus in our latest release. We have a variety of reference apps that you can run using Flutter, and you can run that on an emulator or you can run that on real hardware. Open source license scanning, I say not started. So this was it's not that we don't do open source license scanning, we do that. We have an SBOM available now. This was a very specific task that the instrument cluster expert group wanted to do, and we just didn't get to start that. So I said not started, but there is, don't get me wrong, there is plenty of open source license scanning, and we do, I think, a pretty good job of making sure that our licenses are all well documented. AGL running alongside an RTOS in a container and VM, again, partially completed. We never really got the RTOS piece officially into any of our trees, but we're getting there. Our replacement for the vehicle signal manager, which is kuxa.val, that is now available in our code base. We'll have actually 2 presentations about that later today or tomorrow. I don't remember which one. And then we selected a new IPC. We've selected gRPC and protobufs, and that's, again, partially completed. We've implemented it for some things, and we'll continue to implement new APIs using gRPC and protobufs as we go through the year this year. So like I said, we have a very lengthy process that we follow every year. We all, as hopefully you all realize, we have a number of expert groups that work on various topics. I'm going to give you a little update on each of the expert groups in a minute. Each of the expert groups kind of goes through and reviews what they did last year. They update the feature list. They update what they think they can do this year or what they would like to see be done this year or the next year. They rank that. They bubble that up to the system architecture team, who then reviews that, and they bubble that up to the steering committee, who then review that and vote. And this always takes longer than I hope. So right now we're saying we're going to finish April 18th. My original goal was that we would have this done today, or yesterday rather, and present it to the advisory board, but we didn't quite get there. So we're getting very close, because here's the update, kind of my little update I've been presenting. And so at this point, I think I have a complete feature list from each of the expert groups. Now, when I say updated no for, say, the IVI or vehicle to cloud, what I mean is I've got a feature list that's in Confluence, but I just haven't moved it into that spreadsheet yet. So I think now I have all of the content, and I can move it into that spreadsheet. I think I just got the final pieces yesterday, actually, or Monday. So this is Walt reading the tea leaves at this point. The process isn't complete, but we've had a number of meetings of the expert groups and the system architecture team and the steering committee in the last month or two. And I kind of feel like this is how it's going to shake out once it's all done. Again, SDV, software-defined vehicle, hypervisor, containers, they're going to be a top priority this year. As you saw Ms. Yama-san describe, that's really the future of automotive. That's the way things are going to go. We'll continue to evolve that this year, and I think merging the previous 2 expert groups, the virtualization expert group and the containers and service mesh expert groups into a single entity will really help that. And Jerry Zhao from Panasonic has really done a great job of leading that group, and he'll have a presentation later today to describe their plans for this year. Flutter will continue to be a high priority. Joel Winarski is here today. He'll be giving a presentation, I believe, later today or tomorrow on what their plans are for Flutter, but I think this is a very exciting area of development. We'll continue in the meantime to develop, to improve our web apps. We're looking, I think Roger has a presentation later today on the web apps and what their future is. We're looking at moving into using the Chromium embedded framework as opposed to the WebOS version that we've been using. It'll let us jump up 20 versions in Chromium support at a very rapid pace. So we'll have a little explanation of that later on. Instrument cluster expert group, they'll continue to work very hard on improving and getting closer to product readiness for the instrument cluster. And the one thing I hear consistently in phone calls is, boy, it can be really hard to figure out how to write an app and deploy it on AGL. And we had some training classes about that back in October. We're going to make that content available on YouTube, but it still requires little tricks and tweaks here and there, and some hand-holding from developers who already know what they're doing. So what we're really looking for this year is an improved, basically, developer onboarding process and improved developer workflow, so that it's pretty easy for you to come into the project, write your first application, and deploy it into AGL without a lot of without having to go and ask a lot of questions of a lot of people. So basically that involves both, some code changes in terms of, improving the workflow, as well as documentation improvements. So overall, this is kind of the schedule that you'll see on our wiki page. I updated it about a week ago. Overall, we're looking at, we just made our optimistic Octopus release a few weeks ago, February 27th. We started development now on our basically release 16, so Prickly Pike. And basically we'll continue our every half year cadence of major releases. Prickly Pike will continue on the Kirkstone version of the Octo project, and we'll release that around the end of July. I think I've got more detailed schedules in a few slides. And then we'll start on our quirky Quillback release, which will come out after the CES show next year in 2024. Meanwhile, we'll continue to support Lucky Lamprey updates. So Lucky Lamprey has kind of turned into our initial de facto long-term support version. We're basing it on the Octo long-term support version of Dunfell, or the 3.1 release. And basically about a few weeks after every Dunfell release, you'll see a Lucky Lamprey release. So kind of looking into the future and reading the tea leaves, I think we'll get to about 12.1.15 by the December timeframe. So this would be by far, I think that would be our 16th or 17th release of Lucky Lamprey at that point. So by far it would be the most releases we've done for any of our major releases. So Octopus will continue doing patch releases about every 2 months into September. What I should say is we have I didn't put it in here, we have the nifty Needlefish release that we did last year in July. We think we just released 1403, the third patch release of that. The plan is to do one more patch release at the end of March, and then end of life Needlefish, and basically expect everybody to move on to Octopus. So we won't be supporting that one for too much longer. It'll get about the usual 9 months of support that we do for a typical release. Uh-oh. Okay, this is really bizarre. It says the name of your computer, MacBook Pro 3, is already on this network, and the name has been changed to MacBook Pro 4, but how do I have these displays oriented? Is it over there? There it is. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, Pike, like I said, we'll do our M1 release in June, about June 2nd, and planning our final release at the end of July 21st. Patch releases into early next year. So again, we'll do our typical about 4 patch releases, 9 months of updates. Quillback, we'll start the M1 before the holiday season, and then after CES we'll do an M3 and then a final release. This has kind of been our pattern in the last few years. Okay, so a quick update on the various expert groups and kind of their planning for this year. Provided, instead of me going into a lot of gross level of detail, I think for each of these where there's a Confluence page and they're documenting what they're working on, I've tried to provide that link. These slides will all be updated to Schedule, whatever it's called, right after this presentation is done. I don't think I've uploaded them yet. But basically, we had an app framework expert group, we had a connectivity expert group, we had basically the same attendees with a lot of overlapping topics. So we made the decision that starting in 2 weeks, we'll be basically merging the meetings of these 2 expert groups. At some point, we could move to split them again. We could choose to move the Kuxa.val and the VSS topics to the vehicle to cloud expert groups. But I think we'll make this the home for our developer workflow improvements as we go through the year. And like I said earlier, VSS, which is basically a Covisa project, and Kuxa.val, which is an implementation of VSS from Bosch. They've been getting a lot of traction. We've basically been using them in AGL now. We'll have 2 presentations this week during the AMM, one from Bosch, one from Scott Burry, who's been doing a lot of the implementation on the AGL side. And here's a link to the Confluence page of the various topics that we're looking at for, especially in the app framework area for this year. Like I said earlier, we're standardizing the IPC to gRPC and protopufs basically across the entire unified code base. And we're basically working to replace the legacy WebSocket-based service binders with a gRPC API. Basically, we anticipate it'll be easier to add future toolkits or future services, because we anticipate that as the world continues to evolve, there'll be gRPC APIs available out of the box for a lot of the packages that we think will come along in the future. And we'd have then basically a standard methodology to add any new services. So this will we'll continue to work on this so that all of the new Flutter-based stuff and the new web app-based stuff will all then use the same gRPC APIs. And then, as you saw before, you could write Qt apps and on top of that as well, and those would use those same APIs. This is just kind of a picture of the evolution as we've continued to move through time here. We've moved on from the app framework AFM to App Launch D. We've deprecated SMAC. We're now using SE Linux. Our sandboxing, our packaging rather, was W3C widgets. That's basically part of the new developer workflow that we're going to work on this year, is how do we package and deploy apps going forward. The key thing about SE Linux is right now we're running it in permissive mode. I don't think we're going to spend a whole lot of time running it in enforcing mode unless somebody comes in with basically a framework or a set of rules that we could use, and that would be readily extendable. But for now, I think we'll continue to run it in permissive mode. Again, it's one of those things where we don't want to spend a lot of time working on SE Linux rules that nobody would ever pick up in the real world. So if there was some kind of collaboration between multiple companies and we wanted to work on that, I think that'd be a great place to do that. But for right now, we'll just continue running in permissive mode. So the IVI expert group primarily has been focusing on Flutter. We've got the Flutter reference apps that I already mentioned. It's just kind of a couple of the top highlights of things that Joel had mentioned that they would be working on this year. And I probably very poorly summarized them, but basically workspace automation, navigation and software-defined radio tuner interfaces and applications, camera support and lib camera, and we'll have a discussion, I think, by George about that, either George or Marius, I don't remember which one. So SDV, Jerry will have a presentation, and you've already heard a lot about that from Mizuyama-san, so I don't want to repeat that information. Vehicle to cloud. So at the end of last year, rather not the beginning of this year, at the end of last year, AWS assigned a new engineer, James Simon. He's here this week. He'll be giving a presentation on the work he's been doing. He's really been banging out a lot of stuff. There's a Confluence page here of the work he's done so far, especially with creating a specification and some ideas around implementation, as well as a list of kind of things that need to be done, or an area where he's looking for collaboration. So James has a talk later today, I think, or tomorrow. He's basically been pushing the initial set of code, so he's moving pretty quickly. He's got this initial specification and some initial code that he's pushed to Garrett this week, and he'll have a lot of great information about that, and you can talk to him later. Instrument cluster expert group. So Yamaguchi-san could not make it this week from Japan, but he'll have a virtual presentation, and I think he'll be available for Q&A online afterwards. We'll also have a BOF session on instrument cluster. Some of the other members of the instrument cluster EG are here, as well as some other folks who've been working on that stuff. So we can have some more of an open discussion about the instrument cluster and where it is and where it should go, and your ideas for what you don't want to see in an instrument cluster. So that BOF session will be, I think, at the end of the day before the showcase and the evening event. Basically, kind of at a high level, they've got a lot of different things planned. They want to do a lot more developer outreach, especially in Japan, but essentially improve the demo for next year's CES. Suzuki has a plan to contribute a new and improved UI design, and then continue to develop their container management daemon, include some new technical features. So they've got a lot of stuff planned. Yamaguchi-san has a deep dive into the technical updates coming up, I think right after this. This is his presentation. And then our continuous integration and test expert group that Jan Simon runs, they just, actually I put updates, but they're done. The Lava Lab, they just did an update to the Lava Labs. Fujitsu has done a really fantastic job of building up the automated test suite, finding issues, fixing issues. Jan has a presentation later today as well, and he'll be available. He's virtual. He'll be available for Q&A live. And then tomorrow, Jan Simon will have a presentation on software bill of materials and reproducible builds. And then going forward, they're looking to adopt the Yocto self-test basically to prove that our builds are actually reproducible. And I think he'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay, so last two slides. First off, I'm sure if you need help, you want to ask a question, We've got a weekly developer call on Thursdays. Used to be Tuesdays. Starting in 2 weeks, it will be on Thursdays. Okay? We have an IRC channel, Hash Automotive, on LiberaChat, I think it is. We've got a developer, we've got a community mailing list. You can ask questions in Jira. Most importantly, what we decided to do, and I wanted to show this, when I say we have a weekly developer call on Thursdays, we kind of had started the developer call on Tuesdays for unknown reasons back in the sands of time of like 2015. And as we went along, we added expert group calls here and there, and the schedule became kind of a mishmash of things. So we've decided to do a little realigning of the expert group meetings and the developer call. And basically what we're trying to do is make life a little easier for people, especially who are remote, by basically in even numbered weeks, having all of our expert groups in the system architecture team that meet bi-weekly, and then all the meetings that are occurring weekly, the developer call and the IVI call, occur on the same day, on Thursdays. So we'll see how this works out for the next 6 months. We always have an opportunity to update, to change the schedule, especially when daylight savings time begins or ends. I have to resend all the invitations anyway. So we're going to try this out for 6 months. We'll see how it goes. I got some suggestions from the steering committee yesterday about other possible tweaks to the schedule, including maybe alternating times for the SAT call so that it's in a Japan-friendly time once a month, and we're going to look into that in the next week or two as well. So there's no calls this week. There's no calls next week because we're all at Embedded World. The new schedule starts basically in 2 weeks. And that is it. So I think I've got a few minutes left if there's any questions. No questions? Okay, great. Anybody have a question? All right. Well, thanks everybody. Enjoy your time here.